Night of the Living Dead came out in 1968 and was directed by George A. Romero. Night of the Living Dead was also released in 1990 and was directed by Tom Savini. My question today is, who did it better? Now, first and foremost, George A. Romero was very much a producer of the 1990 version and approved of it, so it's not one of those remakes or sequels where they've gone and effectively bastardized the original. It's very much a remake that was made by Tom Savini with the best intentions in his heart. That being said, is it better? Well, first and foremost, all biases are going to be thrown out there. I love Tony Todd. He is an incredible horror actor. He's an incredible actor, full stop, but Candyman, his character in the Final Destination movies, as well as other things, he's great. Love me some Tony Todd, and personally, I really like him in the 1990 version. He plays Dwayne Jones's character Ben, and he's a much more compassionate version of the character. I think Dwayne Jones's version of the character is very pessimistic. He's fed up with the world, and when these zombies come around, he's just got one thought in mind, and that's survival. Whereas in the case of Tony Todd's version of Ben, he's looking out for the characters around him, particularly Barbara. And Barbara, for me, is probably the biggest character difference between the two movies, because in the 1990 version, Barbara is infinitely more competent. Judith O'Dea's version of the character in 1968 essentially plays the entire film as a woman in shock. She contributes very, very little to the group trying to survive in the house, whereas Patricia Tallman's version is very much a much more badass character, let's just say that much. She offs a lot more zombies. I'm going to get into spoiler territory because that is essentially the driving force between the biggest difference between the two films, which is the ending. Because at the end of the 1968 version, spoiler alert, everyone dies and Ben is the last one killed because they mistaken him for a zombie, or at least we hope that they mistaken him for a zombie. In the 1990 version, Barbara survives. She actually gets out of the house. She leaves Ben, who's bleeding out after being in a shootout with Cooper. As Shane would say, you can't trust those Harrys, and we're going to get onto him very soon. But Barbara does escape. She gets to this sort of redneck camp, which we do kind of see some of in the 1968 version, and they are treating these zombies like animals, disregarding the fact that they used to be humans, having them fight each other, glorify executing them. It's pretty dark stuff. And she has a line that she basically says, they are us and we are them. And she then brings help back to the house to try and see if Ben has survived or if he's bled out. And lo and behold, he has actually turned into a zombie in this second version, which I think the ending of the first one is definitely much more impactful. The first one, it is bleak. Ben survives the zombies but is shot by the humans, and then we get that cold photo montage of them disposing of his body and throwing it on the bonfire, whereas in the 1990 version, Ben, who was a zombie, gets killed, and then Cooper, who's been cowering in the attic the whole time, who is an infinitely bigger dick in the 1990 version, in my opinion, he survived the night, but Barbara kills him in a pretty dark ending, says that he was a zombie, and then they throw him on the bonfire at the end. First and foremost, much prefer the 1968 version, but I do appreciate that in the 1990 version, because it is adapted from the screenplay, it's not a like-for-like remake, Tom Savini decided to go a different direction. I think in the case of any sort of Tom Savini related film, it's obvious the visual effects are infinitely better in the 1990 version. That being said, you're dealing with a much lower budget 1968 version of the film, so got to give it a bit of leeway there, but the effects are definitely better, especially when we first meet Ben. He plows through a zombie in his Chevy, and it is fantastic. And then that zombie is basically on the floor with its legs backwards for like a good 10 minutes of the film. Like, that zombie just will not go away. It really does not like Ben. I think besides those two, though, all the characters are better in the original. I think it's very stagey, almost theater acting, and I don't mean no offense to people in theater, but it just feels very hammed up in the 1990 version with all the other characters, particularly Cooper. Well, actually, he's not necessarily the worst actor, but it just feels like almost a parody or a reinterpretation of the same character, but it just feels almost cartoonish, to be honest. I prefer the more realist, low-key version of those other characters, the Coopers, Tom, his girlfriend Judy Rose in the original. in the remake, I just find that they're very hammed up. You can kind of question whether or not there's any reason for the 1990 version to exist, but I definitely think it warrants itself more so than, say, Gus Van Sant's Psycho. In this case, you have a director who clearly loves the original and just wants to kind of modernize it and put his own flair on it with the different ending and stuff. That being said, which one's better? I think there's only one winner, and that is the original, George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead. I'm not a big fan of zombie movies, but Night of the Living Dead is, for me, one of the best horror movies of the 60s. I'm a huge, huge fan of it. I love how cold it is, how bleak it is. Personally, I think it is definitely, without question, better than the 1990 remake. I would probably still recommend the 1990 version to any horror fans, especially people who've seen the original. Is it an incredible movie? No. Is it a great movie? No. But it's a very solid horror movie. I just don't think it is a patch on the original. But you can tell that there was heart made in it, and that it definitely deserves to exist. But the original is definitely better, in my personal opinion. And that is that. As you all know, we are coming into Noir-vember. We are going to be covering a few films on the podcast. We're not going to tell you which ones, but also, a little personal plug here. If you're interested in my reviews of stuff, I will be doing a film noir review every single day of November on my Instagram and on my TikTok, which you can find here, and I'll link them below as well, so follow those if you want to follow along on that series. But yeah, thank you very much. I've been Harry Bailey from the Golden Hour Film Podcast, and yeah, the original is better. Shock, horror. I'd love to know how many times we've said that the original is better in this series. Probably every time. Surely every time. Ocean's 11, and Shane was right for that.